is that the world we are moving into is going to be very different from the world in the past. I hear a lot. I think there's now a consensus that the 1991 reforms that were brought about by Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh, both these guys were very decisive, very clear. They had a pretty wide team. I was privileged to be one of them. And I think things went very well. At the time, it was controversial. People who didn't like it said, "I got it." But looking back, if you get away from the political controversies of today, I think the good thing about a democracy is there's always a controversy. If there isn't a controversy, it's not a democracy. So let's be clear about it. If you want to be a democracy, you should be able to say, what is the other point of view, or whatever it is you think you approve of. But I think looking back, people from different sides of the present political spectrum kind of agreed that 1991 was a major reform. And they always say, well, we need a similar reform today. The main point that I want to make is that that's not necessarily the right solution, because I think 1991 was a very simple problem. I mean, the rest of the world was fine. We were the ones that were mucked up. We were doing things that nobody else was doing, and all we had to do was jump all of that. That's difficult, but it's intellectually not very complex. Today, nobody knows what to do. I mean, I think that goes for the richest and most powerful country, and it goes to the rest of the world. So, what are the four things that are going to make life difficult? And I've actually listed six for India. One is clearly geopolitics, and I'll say a few things about that. Second is technology, and I'll say a few things about that. The third is climate change, say a few things on that. And the fourth is fiscal capacity to do what needs to be done. You know what? I think Raji said that moving from slogans to actual policies always involves some money. And that has to be fitted into whatever the fiscal constraints are. And there are two others which we need to think about, which I really knew. One of those is urbanization, and well, I'll come to that. And the last one is demographics. Now, as I said, I'm not going to provide a solution. I'm going to hopefully trigger some thinking. So let me, since these are six things and I have limited time, and they tell me you want some time for questions and answers. So let me say a few things about each. You know, geopolitics, I mean, earlier, geopolitics was very simple. It was bipolar world with the West and the South more or less led by the United States. And then you have Russia and the communist bloc, which was not terribly integrated. And so trade, etc., took place in the first bloc. Over time, somewhere around 2000, a little before that, the Chinese decided that they were going to open up, and the United States actually decided to help them. And they decided to help them because they felt that this would make them less of a threat and less sort of an opposing group. China would not have been able to do what it did if they had not been helped by the United States to get into WTO markets and all that kind of thing. Incidentally, you mentioned engineering. It gave the impression that perhaps not having an engineer is good for the economy. This is not actually true because, you know, 90% of Chinese decision makers are engineers. But 90% of ours certainly not engineers. Many of them don't even have degrees. So